Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Just as a quick recap of the weekend, the first map I want to show you is the Storm Prediction Center's Day 1 outlook from last week when the severe weather hit parts of Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana and through here. And I just want to show you how good of a job the Storm Prediction Center does. Of course, we did have a bunch of high wind reports the following day on Saturday that hit parts of Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and this area as well, but the Storm Prediction Center was on top of this. When you look back at the total amount of precipitation we did get out of that system, you can see some very heavy rains down here along the lower Mississippi River Basin, but also quite a bit that did extend from parts of central Kansas that stretched up into Wisconsin. And again, some of the rain that got back farther to the west here in central Kansas was before this map was made. This is a 3-day map ending this evening at 5 p.m. Now, the next big event is already taking shape in the western United States. It spread some light snow today across parts of North Dakota and out of Montana, and heavier snows that have hit parts of the mountains. We got a whole lot more that's coming into the Sierra Nevada for California. But if we just, before we get into that, look at what we've seen lately, especially on the Mississippi watershed, this map looks at the last 2 weeks of total accumulated precipitation. We've had multiple storm systems roll up along fronts that have been stalled out right here through parts of the Midwest. And so from the Red River Valley at the south up to the Great Lakes, we've had some areas in here that have picked up, 2 to 3 times the normal amount of rainfall. On either side, it's been dry, and we're about to change that in a big way. Big snowfall event coming through South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota. We've also got a tropical system, possibly a hurricane named Nicole, that could race up the East Coast, delivering a lot of rainfall. And there's a large system coming into the western United States. But there will be a few pockets that remain after this. And what I want to show you here is this. This is the latest soil moisture data from today, here on the 7th. While we'll see some improvement here, I'm not so sure how far back down to the south into the western plains, central plains and through this area we're going to get it. There'll be improvements here, but I don't think we're going to see much in the eastern Corn Belt. So we need to take a close look at how this is going to shape up. But overall, the heavier rains that have come through this section of the country have delivered moisture to parts of the Mississippi watershed. But as we talked about, it's going to take some time for it to recover. Now, I've just checked all of the major gauges here along the Mississippi, starting all the way up here, at Cairo, going all the way down through New Madrid, and down here to Memphis is where we've been really looking a lot at. Just to make a point here that right now Memphis is still about 11 feet, 12 feet below its low stage, and it's expected to stay there. So even with all that precipitation that came through, it did not yet start to fill up the river, so it's going to continue to take quite a bit more time. I also want to show you the latest snow map. Now, this one was valid through this morning on Monday, so I'm recording this again on Monday night, so this was valid through Monday morning. And we did see quite a bit of snow that was added up here in the Cascades, in parts of the northern Rockies. We're going to see a whole lot more getting added into California. It's been doing that today. So taking a look at our latest satellite imagery just as the sun was setting across the country here. A couple important things to note: some storms that have popped up into Texas. You got a low cloud shield that was hanging out right here in the middle part of the country. It's kind of neat to just watch that low cloud field just move to the north. I imagine a lot of folks in Nebraska just saw it clear out as it moved through the north today. But the bigger features are really just the momentum that's in the jet stream right now. Look at these clouds right here. Watch this. Ready? As I just go back and forth, the jet is just screaming over the top of that. And that's part of a deeper trough that's going to just rip out this big storm system later this week that's going to hit into parts of the Dakotas. More on that in a second. But let's come back to just as the sun was setting here over Nicole. This is subtropical storm Nicole. And the latest data we have on Nicole from the National Hurricane Center, this was released 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight, shows us that there is a possibility that Nicole could become a hurricane before making landfall, likely somewhere here well north of Miami, but sitting in this vicinity. There's already hurricane watches out. Now, with Nicole, the greatest threat is not necessarily going to be the winds. Most forecast models are keeping this at a very weak hurricane at this point. That, of course, could change. But the reason why it's making this hard turn to the west is because a big area of high pressure is going to sit here, and the steering currents are going to push it that way. And then by the time it moves over Georgia, it will actually link up with the front that will be associated with the system that's going to potentially produce the heavy snow in the Dakotas and pull it right along the eastern side of the United States. So I think the primary threat from this is going to be one with too much rainfall. But I want to show you, and I think this has got it captured the best from the Storm Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center. They have the probability of seeing at least tropical storm force winds here relatively high. So there could be some 30 to 70 mile an hour gusts out of this, and a lot of 30 to 40 mile an hour winds that could hit parts of the southeast. Now, when we take a look at where it's going, I really like the WPC solution on this. This, again, is from the National Weather Service. And you can see they've got a pretty hard line here using the 12Z run as to who has the best chances of picking up at least a couple of inches. There will be some spots in here from Florida, getting up here along the East Coast, that are going to see 2 to 4+ inches of rainfall. You notice that on the back side of this, a big section here of the Midwest and into the Mid-South is going to be dry through the next 7 days. But this was the 12Z run. We do have the 18Z run, and I want to show you the trend. So just watch right over here as I show you the new 18Z data. And you notice that there was a pretty sizable shift to the west of some of the heavier precipitation with the latest model data we got this afternoon. So there is a bit of a trend to the west with the trajectory of this, and I'm going to do a multi-model analysis of it in just a few moments. Now, this system that's ripping through the west and coming into the upper Midwest, I say ripping because the jet stream level winds are incredible. This is just how large the low is currently sitting in this area. And it produced some very strong winds that came through the plains today, kind of pulling this moisture back into Montana. It's going to curl around in this low. But this is what the jet stream level winds look like. And as you take a look here, some of these winds in this area, I mean, we're well over 150 miles an hour, and this particular tilt on this system being positive means it's going to plow through the west and then eject a system into the northern plains. And that's what we're going to have to spend quite a bit of time just looking at here today. So the all hazards weather map this evening, 6 p.m. Central Time, shows us we have winter storm watches out for this part of the Dakotas and Montana, winter weather advisories through Montana, and this is a risk for a wind chill advisory. Very cold air coming into Montana. You'll see that in a few moments. We do have tropical storm watches that are out, tropical storm warning that is out here, and a hurricane watch along the coast of Florida. But winter storm warnings in California, and this system as it dives down is going to be producing some very strong winds. So I want to do this multi-model analysis. I know I haven't done this for you in a while, but I want to look at both the European and the GFS. So remember, if you've seen this before, the GFS is on the left and the arrow's on the right. So we've got a couple things here, right? We have Nicole. We have the first low that's going to eject today, and then the second one that's coming down farther to the south. So here we go with the 12Z runs from today. So as we play through tonight into Tuesday morning, that's Tuesday morning. This is the first low coming out. So you can see the snow spreading through parts of Montana, but into the Canadian prairie of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Could get some more isolated storms down south, blasting through this evening and tonight into tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, down here in parts of the southern plains. Now, this is the main feature right here. And the models are pretty well keyed in on what it's going to be doing by Tuesday midday, getting into Tuesday evening. And that's a lot of snow in the Sierra Nevada. Some of the model forecasts are up over 40 to 50 inches above 4,000 feet with this in the Sierra Nevada. Now, while that's happening, Nicole is approaching, and the first system moves over Lake Winnipeg, and there might be some scattered rain out ahead of it, right in through here. Now, this system's going to leave a front that the next one's going to grab onto. So if we just go to Wednesday morning, Wednesday midday, Wednesday evening, that front sits right in through here, so we could get some rain, just some cold rain sitting on that front throughout Wednesday. But then what we'll be watching is by Wednesday night into Thursday morning, the next low emerges. The GFS and the Euro both have it coming out in this part of Nebraska. That's very good agreement. And about the time that emerges, 6 a.m. Thursday, we now have Nicole making landfall in Florida. Very well timed on both forecasts here. So you can see the backside of this system delivering a lot of snow to Wyoming, parts of southeastern Montana, but the Dakotas and this section of Nebraska. The European, it's not quite as aggressive as the GFS over here on bringing the snow into Nebraska. But what we'll see is that low pulls through parts of the Red River Valley, then gets through kind of the arrowhead of Minnesota and into Ontario. Now, what you also noticed is what was happening over here with what's left of Nicole. You see the main frontal boundary by Friday midday will be stretched right through this part of, Michigan and Indiana and Ohio, right down here through Tennessee and Kentucky. The Europeans a little slower and a little weaker with it. So I think that's part of the reason why the more moisture is getting spread back farther. And also, I think the high is a bit stronger in the European model, pushing it farther in this direction, that high right there. But here we go. This is now Friday evening, getting into the overnight hours, Saturday morning, Saturday midday, and Saturday evening. And behind this, lake effect snow on some very cold air coming in. You'll see that in the models. and heavy rains that will spread early this weekend into, Friday into Saturday into parts of New England. What we're going to watch behind that, though, is a bit of a pattern adjustment linking Alaska to Scandinavia. We'll talk about that more in a second. But the models are not done. You can see they're trying to bring in another system into California by this weekend, and going into early next week into Monday and Tuesday. We can see that the European's a bit more aggressive on that next system coming through, and we'll take a look at why that is in just a few seconds. But let's keep this model comparison going. So, European total liquid out of this compared to the GFS. So European and GFS. Honestly, they're both pretty well locked in. The major difference is the European model brings back more moisture to this corridor than the GFS does. There's the GFS. So European, GFS. In fact, we can see it by just comparing them. Remember, these colors represent where the European is wetter. These are where the GFS is wetter. So in North Carolina, look at the split here. Same thing for Virginia. The European is much wetter farther to the west in those states and then carries that bias into New England, whereas the GFS is much wetter up near coastal parts of Virginia and North Carolina. Now, the next system coming through late in the time period, the GFS is less aggressive than the European. That's why you see it wetter in California. But we got to talk about the winter side of this. Now, first of all, with this system that comes out midweek and then rolls into Ontario, there is the risk of getting some ice accumulating here due to the overrunning in parts of South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota into Ontario. But let's go ahead and take a look at what those snowfall totals look like. Let's do a model comparison again. So this is the European solution, total accumulated snow through the next 7 days, and this is the GFS. And what I'm looking for here is just consistency in where they're putting the heaviest snows. And overall, there is good model consistency. Now, there are nuances. Like, look how much farther to the south the GFS brings the snow in parts of South Dakota, where the European doesn't do that. They both deliver lake effect snow after this low goes by, and they're also both putting just a tremendous amount into the Sierra Nevada, 1 to 4 feet, which is great to see. Now, let's look at that one other way. This is the probability of getting at least 3 inches of snow, okay, over the next 7 days. Here's 6 inches of snow. So while we see these huge snowfall totals in the models, right? I mean, this is way up here on my color bar in the 16 to 20 inch range out of the operational run. Just remember that the ensemble is suggesting that the probability of getting greater than 6 inches is in that 50 to 80% range. This is the chance of getting over a foot. So we just need to understand that maybe the operational runs are a bit too aggressive with the total amount of snow on this, but that, I'm just telling you, the potential is there for some very heavy snow in this corridor. From here, let's now look at who's not getting the precipitation, and this is an important thing to take a look at. So notice Colorado, parts of Kansas, Texas, and then of course into Arizona, New Mexico, dry. This is the chance of getting less than a half inch of rain or total liquid equivalent over the next 10 days. Same thing for parts of the eastern Corn Belt stretching down to the south. Now what's really important to look at is how we see much drier conditions in the Northwest and throughout British Columbia to the Canadian Prairie. And that's something we need to talk about, because by the time we get out there to the end of this weekend into early next week, we start to see a ridge building into Alaska and a ridge building over Scandinavia. Now watch this. As we play forward out into Wednesday the 16th, I'll just park it out here. I don't know, let's just stop it on Friday the 18th. There is high pressure kind of linking Scandinavia to Alaska. And when that occurs, we tend to get a cross polar setup of troughs over Russia and the Hudson Bay. So generally speaking, this brings flow in like this, which has convergence in it and therefore high pressure and drier. But this is what's important to watch after it. We still have troughs of low pressure coming off of Japan moving like this, which means this whole linking of this Scandinavian ridge to Alaska is likely temporary, doesn't stay around for a long time. But because it's there for most of week 2, we tend to see the wettest conditions south, like California, coming out of Texas into Louisiana, the lower Mississippi River Basin, versus drier conditions north and much, much colder conditions to the north as well. In fact, take a look at what these temperatures are going to do. Now, this was Monday's high temperatures. This is Tuesday. Look at how cold the air is going to be coming out of parts of Montana. Heat out ahead of it, that gets replaced pretty quickly, but not until later in the week. That's Wednesday. There it is. On Thursday, we start to drive the colder air in. Still quite hot on Thursday into parts of the Midwest here, but that gets replaced by Friday into Saturday and Sunday. And here we are just kind of plummeted into winter-like temperatures. And the question is, how long does that last? The latest update from the CPC suggests that out there through maybe the 20th, we keep the risk of very cold conditions in place here. Now, to see how long it lasts by the models, this is just that 5-day sliding window I like to show you. Let's park it out there day 5 through 10, which gets us out there from the 12th through the 17th. And we can see much below normal temperatures, and it's going to last all the way up to the beginning of that week of Thanksgiving. Got a lot of colder air that's tucked into place. Now, before I get to the long-range stuff, I kind of put that at the end today, kind of give you a quick update on South America. Planting progress in Mato Grosso, just about 1.5%, 2% off of last year's pace, but well ahead of the 5-year average, which means this crop is in, it's established. We need to look at how the rains are going to return. So this is a 5-day sliding window on precipitation anomalies. And after we get through the end of this week into early next week, the models have been very consistent. We started talking about this midweek last week, okay? That they're going to be delivering better rainfall into parts of Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and southern Brazil. Much of the reason why this is happening is because of the trade wind breakup we talked about at the end of last week happening right now. But those trade winds come right back. And because they're going to do that, we go back over to what we had been seeing, which was better rains farther to the north, where the growing season got off to a fast start, and drier conditions to the south. And what I'm talking about there is this. You see the nose of these stronger trade winds coming in here? This is all the way out there on the 12th. There's some stronger winds coming out of the Indian Ocean, and that means a lot of rising motion right in the middle. So this is what it actually looks like when I show you these diagrams. You see the trade winds keep making these surges. See the blue-greens? That's right in through here. There's still westerly winds coming out here. And so where does it meet? Right there, which is back over phase 6. Now you're all familiar with phase 6. We talked a lot about it. It's one where when the MJO comes curling back around into this phase, we tend to get troughs coming off of Japan, like you just saw me talk about. That ends up producing more troughs coming through the Gulf of Alaska. We tend to see some ridging events that often set up here at times over the south and southeast. They like to move with the open flow. So what does this end up giving us? Well, it takes us right back to what we've been talking about, which is if troughs are going to inundate the western United States, we expect wetter conditions there to continue through fall. In fact, I've got this now from November 21 to December 21. Overall, if there's any place that runs the risk of being drier, it's right in the southeast. We're going to see routine systems, about one a week, going across the midsection of the country. And we could also now see better moisture coming out of the lower Mississippi River Basin. So this gets us up to the winter solstice here with an outlook, which means that's when we officially begin winter. Now, to back this up, I want to let you know that the CFSV2 is on board with this, and so is the newest outlook from NOAA. This is their week 3, week 4 forecast, which gets them to the beginning of December. You still see they're forecasting the above normal precip with the risk of being drier here. Now just take note, it's this warmer air that might come back here, it's more than 2 weeks out. Okay, it's probably 2.5, 3 weeks out before we start to see the warmth returning to this area. So that cold blast that's coming through is going to last for a while, given the changes in that Scandinavian ridge versus the Alaskan ridge. All right, so we have these two kind of sub-seasonal things working. The MJO, which is going to take over at the end of November again, and right now the Scandinavian-Alaska ridge pair there. All right. Okay, bigger things to talk about. South America, the same time period. The models, because the MJ goes back where it was, sink right back into developing drought, primarily along the Paraná River Basin. That's a very important area from Mato Grosso through Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul into very productive areas of Argentina, right into here, like near Santa Fe over toward Cordoba. Could there be better rains in the very dry parts of Buenos Aires? Yes. We see that coming up in the next few days. Could continue, but this is important just to see how they're going to finish up with their planting. Now from there, this is maybe the most important graph for us to discuss. And over the next few long-range videos, we're going to look at this from an international perspective as well, but today I'll focus on the U.S. What you've got here is the fact that the models continue to forecast this La Niña once we get into the new year to begin its fade. And what that means to me is we could develop split jet stream flow for the second half of winter, delivering better subtropical flow paired with a polar jet coming out of the Pacific. But then by spring, we're in ENSO neutral. And you can see that some of the models by next summer are fully into El Nino territory. Some of the ensemble members, excuse me. Now, we'll update this as the new data comes in from the other modeling agencies to see if this is consistent. But oftentimes when you have a big La Nina that finishes, it often overcorrects, doesn't stay in neutral for long, and you go right into, you end up going right into El Nino conditions. Now we can see that by looking at the latest model data. Ready? This is November into December, January. Now you watch right here, this fade, okay? Going into February, March, April, and May. And there we start to see what could be, by next May, out of ENSO neutral conditions and into weak La Nina. So what does this do to the wintertime precipitation data here from the European model? Again, the first that comes up every new month. Well, this is November, December, January precipitation. And that particular outlook, wetter in the northwest and northern California, drier across the southern U.S. to the southeast, that is telltale strong La Nina. Now we get into December, January, February, and then January, February, March, and this is what I'll be watching to see happen. Now, right now, when you look at this graphic, I could take this out, put it in a textbook, and say, this is the typical precipitation pattern when there's a La Nina. We've had them, data on them over 70 years. Historically, it's wetter here. More snowy across the northern tier of the United States. Active Ohio River Valley storm track. Drier in the southeast, drier in the southwest. That's very typical La Nina. I don't think this is going to verify, though. What I mean by that is I think we're going to get a northerly component of the jet, and we'll see midwinter, sometime after beginning of January, more of a subtropical component to the jet stream developing. Now, when you look at this next graphic, which is showing you temperatures, I do not think that this is going to be as warm as advertised here. In other words, when you see the above normal temperatures forecast by the model creeping pretty far to the north, I think that's a bit too far to the north. In fact, I tend to lean more on, let's go just pull it up real quick, the CPC's forecast. They're going to be updating this very soon, but if we go look at what their previous forecast was for January, February, March, you see they've got more of the risk of being above average farther to the south, with more frequent intrusions of colder air across the northern tier of the United States into the plains, Midwest, and Northeast. This is maybe the more representative forecast for winter temperatures that we could be expecting. Now, later this week, I'm going to talk about what this means for Europe. We need to talk about the drought in China. We also need to talk about what's going on in Australia and South America. But I'll save those analysis for later videos. We'll just keep you up to pace on those things. Appreciate your extra attention tonight, and we will talk to you again very soon. Thank you.